Good morning, good morning. This is Julia coming to you from WCRXLP, Columbus, Ohio, 102.1 FM on your radio dial, the broadcast radio service of the Bexley Public Radio Foundation. Remember to visit our website at WCRXLP.com. Well, I'm going to give you a weather report this morning, but we usually get it from the Ohio Farmer's Almanac, or the Old Farmer's Almanac, I should say. I'm sorry. But their website's down this morning, so we're using Google. Here we go. Today, overcast. And of course, what else? Rain. High of 47. For the future days of our week, Tuesday, 47 again, more rain, with a low of 43. Wednesday, 52. Wow. Break out the shorts. More rain, low of 38. Thursday, partly sunny, 45 with a low of 34. You know what? I'm so glad all this rain is not snow. For our inspirational quote for today, it's from Joshua. We're told to keep moving, move toward new things. We mourn for whatever reasons, but we also need to move toward the future. Be strong, vigorous, and courageous. And as everyone knows by now, we're on a countdown up to that special day of Sunday, but always remember the reason for the season, the birth of baby Jesus. Now over to my co-host, Wayne Gatewood. How are you?
Julia, I am fantastic. How are you today?
Simply marvelous.
Simply marvelous.
Yes.
Well, we've got an exciting guest here today. I can't wait to tell everybody more about her. But what I'd like to start out with today is just talk about why we're here. And one of the reasons that we're here, or several, is to educate aspiring broadcasters and speakers while delivering a dialogue around different community issues. Today, our table talk tip is we want to talk about Toastmasters. And, why does anybody want to be a part of Toastmasters? I just don't know why. I mean, people that they ask you, they think we drink and, have
yes,
cocktails and do all this other stuff.
Yes.
So I know it's been a while, but I thought I'd come back and talk about this. The first thing I want to start with is Ralph Smedley, the actual gentleman that founded Toastmasters. I love his quote. It says, "We learn best in moments of enjoyment. We learn best in moments of enjoyment." And I think that's probably one of the big things I've gotten out of Toastmasters is watching how much care we take when we have people come out and want to be a member in Toastmasters or want to at least try it out. They get to see that it is an enjoyable atmosphere. Yeah, there are some critiques that go on, which is part of growth, but I think the way that we do it is critical. Anyway, some of the things that you can get from being a part of Toastmasters that you can put into your personal arsenal are you're improving your speaking skills. You get confidence in dealing with a variety of situations, especially those of us that may be a little intimidated by our bosses. I think the more organized you get and the more speeches you give and the research you have to do, I think it makes you become more confident when you have to go in and talk about that raise or that promotion or just some touchy issues. The other thing is networking. You meet so many different people. You meet from all different walks of life, so that's very critical. And then something that was very helpful to me, and when I first became a member in Toastmasters, there was one lady that stuck out for me. Her name is Dana Rogers, and I remember going to Dana and asking her to help me put together my first speech and ask her to be my mentor. I didn't realize they had mentors then, but they have mentors, and that's real good because there's a lot of talk about mentors, but somebody to take you through the process is very critical. And Dana was very helpful to me. And again, we always assign mentors to the new speakers, and so they can hit the ground running. And something else that I don't think we really think about is organization. I think because of Toastmasters, because putting together a speech, you've got to get organized. And I like to talk about the 3 R's. But as far as getting organized, it helps you in many other things. You could be putting together a business proposal or Maybe you're going to school to talk to your teachers or your kids' teachers about something, some issue, so it helps you to get organized. But I always like to talk about the 3 R's, and they're reading, writing, and research. You can't really do a speech without doing those 3. And I notice, especially when I work with the young people on the Toastmaster programs, that they get kind of tricked into doing the research, and then things just kind of grow from there. Well, what I'd like to do next is talk a little bit about our guest today. Our guest today claims she doesn't like to speak, but she's one of the best speakers that I've seen. She's very natural. And another thing about our speaker, well, actually both of my co-hosts and our guest speaker, we're from the same neighborhood. And this is kind of interesting. The longer I live, the more I find out more people grew up on the hilltop in Columbus and went to school there than you can imagine. And the other thing that I found out about the hilltop, there's been a lot of great people that come from that area. Well, anyway, the lady's name is Maria Scott. Maria was born in Columbus, Ohio. She used to live probably about 100 yards away from me on Midland Avenue in Columbus. Yes. And Maria...
Oh my goodness, me too!
And her and my co-host, as you said, she lived on Midland too. So anyway, I grew up there. I was there for probably about 44 years. I was raised there along with my family. Then Maria, she went on to graduate from West High School. She attended Fisk University in Nashville. She later transferred to Ohio State University and graduated with a BS in computer science. She retired earlier this year after a long career in information technology and several years in the real estate industry with her husband. Maria, you don't know this, but I got some great mentoring from your husband. Yes, I've had the gift of carpentry. I was given that by the Lord, by God, when I was a little boy. But at 5 years old, I learned how to do carpentry work with my uncle in the backyard. Well, your husband being in the real estate business and doing rehabs and things, I used to bug him to death over there in his office. I think, was it on Ohio
Yes,
Avenue?
he did have an
Yes.
office.
Okay, I remember bugging him to death, and he'd always send me off on some wild goose chase to go. He said, well, go check this particular property out and see how they did the remodeling in there and things like that. And I wanted to be a rehabber. That's before flipping houses and that was fashionable.
Right.
But he showed me a lot of things, he and Mr. Kendrick. So he was very helpful. And I think he probably helped a lot of people that nobody probably even knows about.
That's true.
Me too.
Maria she's involved in many enjoyable activities during her retirement. One of those is she's a member of the Columbus Whitehall Toastmasters, which she joined in 2002. And this is kind of fun. You know, I got to say it, Maria, you say you don't like to speak, and then you bring your husband to Toastmasters, and he joins. I mean, come on. So anyway, she's a very enjoyable person, and what I'll do right now is introduce you to Maria, and she's going to give us her testimonial to get started, and then we will talk a little bit about the topic.
Okay, thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome.
I joined Toastmasters a little bit after I became a manager at my company. And being a manager, I was able to address a lot of situations that I had seen while I was just an employee. But I also found that your superiors would come up and ask you questions off the cuff, and you had to have a ready answer. But I'm more of an analytical type person. I like to think about things deeply before I answer, and I would get this deer in the headlights look when I get these off the cuff questions and kind of stammer while I try to think, what is the answer?
Right.
And after a while of dealing with this, I said, I've got to do something about this so I can retain my job. And I thought about Toastmasters. My mother, when I was a young person, had been a member of Toastmasters, which is, they had men groups and women groups for the Toastmasters. And so I said, well, maybe that will help me to do that. Although I knew that I was comfortable doing prepared speeches, I thought maybe I'll get some tips that will help me. And the first Toastmaster meeting I went to, one of the first things they did was table topics. And that's where you speak just off the cuffs. You get a question while you're standing there, and you may or may not know anything about that question, but you have to give a sensible answer. And so I said, that's it for me. That's what's going to help me in my job. And sure enough, even though it took me 6 months to do my first table topic because I was afraid, but sure enough, after I did it a while, I was no longer afraid. I would still get those questions that my business things that I may not know the answers to, but I could be comfortable. Okay, I have a minute or two or a second or two to think about it, and now I can come up with a logical stream of thought. And so that helped me. Another plus that I wasn't expecting was, as a manager, you have to evaluate your employees.
Wow.
And you know, in Toastmasters, we are constantly evaluating people on the spot. You evaluate a speech, you don't hear the speech in advance, and you've got to think while the person is talking, how am I going to give this person some good points, and how am I going to give them something they can work on? So that even helped me further in my job to do evaluations. So I was very much improved in my job because of Toastmasters.
Yeah, I find that quite interesting. Once you start digging into things, all the things that you never thought of start coming to the surface. Okay. Well, we're getting ready for the main event here. The topic today is genealogy, and Maria is going to enlighten us on what she knows about that, and we can't wait. I've got quite a large family, and I've done a little bit of digging, but I can't wait to hear what you have to offer. And here's my co-host Julia. We'll be having the Q&A here with our guest. Go ahead.
Well, Maria, I'm very glad to have you with us this morning and to find out you and I lived on the hilltop, graduated from West High School. Oh, my goodness. Okay, on with the topic of genealogy. First question, how did you get interested in genealogy?
Well, genealogy was something I was kind of interested in because I came from a small family and I always wanted more relatives. But one time I was in Louisville at a costume ball with two cousins, and I knew that they were related to me. They each knew they were related to me, but when they found out they knew each other and were related to me, they thought, well, how come we're not related to each other? And I couldn't answer the question. Fortunately, my great uncle was there, and he came up and he answered the question, that one of the cousins was related to us on his mother's side, the other was related to us on his father's side. Hence, they were not related to each other. This started me thinking about the other cousins and aunts and uncles that I knew about. How was I related to them? So I started interviewing relatives, asking questions, writing down notes. And later on, a distant cousin came to me and said, let's go to Shelbyville, Kentucky. Who ever heard of Shelbyville, Kentucky? But that's where we knew our ancestors came from. She said, let's go to the courthouse and look for records. And so that introduced me to the fact that there are records that allow you to get more information than you can even get from your relatives. So that's how I got started in it.
That's interesting. Okay, now how far back have you tracked your family tree?
I'll tell you, as an African American, it's very hard to track your family prior to the Civil War. And that's because African Americans were enslaved, and as slaves they didn't have last names. Your name might be Sally, but if you were sold to another master, then your name might be Joni. And so it's very hard for people to track you. Plus, very few records were kept. If they were, they weren't kept in normal places. So for most of my family lines, I can go back to somewhere in the 1870s. However, I did have one family member who lived in Indiana, and even though he was enslaved there were a lot of records kept in Indiana, and so I was able to track him. He was born in the year 1791.
Wow. So if I wanted to trace my family, I'd have to go about going back and starting just as you did.
Yes. There's a lot of things you want to do, and the first thing you want to do is take a class in genealogy.
Okay.
I've found that most libraries have classes in genealogy. I looked on the website of the Bexley Library, and they have classes in genealogy. The Columbus Public Library has classes in genealogy. So I would recommend everyone do that first. Another thing is there are a lot of online genealogy forums. There are also local groups that are interested in genealogy. You can get so many tips from them. So I would recommend joining at least one of those groups so you can stay tuned into where people are getting their information from.
Now, I can hear in your voice you have a lot of joy in doing this, but what actually gives you that extra spark of excitement?
I like getting new information. It just thrills me when I can find out something about a relative, especially when I put my hands on it. This is a census record for somebody that I didn't know. And this census caretaker went to that place, and they talked to that person, and they recorded what they have, and that gives me new joy to know about these people, to know about their lives, their struggles, to know about their occupations, where did they move to over the course of their life, and then I start wondering why did they move there. So it gives me a lot of joy to find that out. Also, this is like a puzzle where you don't have all the puzzle pieces. You get a few pieces and you try to figure out where do they fit, and there's nothing that matches them right then, but you put them in your little bag of tricks and you come back to them later. So it's very interesting. Just it's a challenge trying to find out everything. And also the struggle of your ancestors. Nobody had it perfect. Everybody had rough roads in life, and if they can make it, then that lets you know you can make it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Were there more challenges that were more difficult than others in this genealogy?
There are a lot of challenges in genealogy. The first genealogy class I went to said, if you're going to be embarrassed by what you find, then don't do this. And they specifically mentioned you may find out that there's some relatives that you have high respect for that were never married, and they appeared to be married. They said, if you can't handle that, don't even do this. So that's the first challenge you must face. The next one is that if you're going to be a pure genealogist, then you must find 3 pieces of documentation for every person, or else that person didn't exist. So you look for the 3 pieces of documentation. There may be a census record, there may be a birth certificate, a marriage license, a death certificate. And another challenge comes when you find those 3 pieces. They may not agree on what they say. They may say the person was born in one place on one record and another place on another record. They may say their birth date was one day on one record and another day on another record. So you have to resolve in your mind as best as you can what is the reality. And a lot of times people didn't know when they were born, especially if they were born prior to birth certificates being issued. Another challenge that you have is sometimes you run into a brick wall. You just can't find any more information about a person. My husband used to chuckle because sometimes I would say, this person just disappeared off the face of the earth. And he said, who are you talking about? And I'm saying, 1880, this person just disappeared. And that may come about because of various reasons. For instance, there were a lot of fires back in the 1800s because of the kind of lighting they used. And a lot of times there were fires that destroyed records. There were courthouse fires. There was even a fire that destroyed the census record, the federal census record of 1890. You can't find people unless you're looking for about 6 states. So fires was an issue for destroying records. Another thing is the record may be there, but the ink has smeared, yes, or the ink has faded, yes, or whatever. So you can't find that information. Another challenge is sometimes you hit upon family hurts. Somebody may have something that happened to them and their family, and they don't want to talk about it. And you have to recognize when that happens, yeah, and back off. Yeah. It may be that they never ever tell you what really happened. You may never know that part of the family. But then again, they may tell you at some point, now I can talk about it. Mm-hmm. So you have to deal with that. Another thing is that everything's not digitized. There are zillions of records all over the place, but very few are online. So you have to be aware that you might have to travel somewhere in order to get more information. And the last thing that I think all genealogists struggle with is your work is never finished. Just when you think, okay, this is ready, I'm going to donate this to the library so somebody else can find this history, and you find something else. You say, oh, I got to put that in the history. And you know that keeps going, that keeps going. So you never know when you're finished. So those are the challenges.
Okay. Now, have there ever been any long-lost relatives found?
Yes, I have found a couple of people, well, actually 3 people that I didn't know about. In the first 2 cases, the people weren't interested in talking to me, and I understand that. Everybody doesn't like genealogy, they don't want to know the history, and so they just won't talk to you. The third person I found was very talkative, very interesting, and I just got so much information from her. I think I offended her because I found out that her grandparents were first cousins to each other. I never told her that. I never told her that. I realized that, and I don't think she ever realized it. But I was sending her some information about my family tree, and she saw the name of these cousins, and she said, oh, those are cousins of mine. And I tried to sweep it off, like, don't worry about that. But after that, she quit talking to me, and I tried to get back in her good graces, because she was an older person. She was in her 80s, and she just had all the kind of information I wanted. But she didn't talk to me anymore.
Well, you can always find out from someplace else. Maria, where in the world do you store all of this genealogy information that you find?
At first, I was storing it in binders. I would have a binder for each branch of the family, and I got quite a few binders, and so I put those binders in boxes, and my little home office was overcome with binders and boxes. Then someone introduced me to genealogy software, and that was very helpful, because it allows you to instantly generate family trees. If someone asks me about a particular segment, I can do that. It allows me to do quick searches on names. I think, oh, that sounds like a family name, and I can quickly find out, yes, it is. And so it's much more efficient than dealing with binders and boxes. And so I use genealogy software. There's quite a few different ones out there, but they are very helpful.
Okay, now, last question.
Okay.
Tell me, Maria, are your children interested at all in this genealogy that you're doing? Do they want to carry this on, keep it going?
I don't think at this point anyone is interested in carrying it on and keeping it going. My youngest son seems the most likely candidate, and I said I'm going to put it in my will that somebody must take all this information, give it to the libraries at least, because if they're not interested, maybe 200 years from now somebody will be interested, and the hard work may have been done for them.
Well, this has been very, very interesting topic, and for those of you out there, I hope that Maria was able to give you a lot of pointers. She even told you that you go to the libraries to start. Okay? I think, T.Wayne, you have a question for Maria?
Oh, I've got some questions and thoughts. Yeah, the first thing is, you know, when you were talking about not being able to find records, I remember hearing my grandmother talk about midwives. When you were running into looking for information, did you find that the people that probably were birthed were delivered by midwives, those people, it was hard to find their information?
Oh, very hard to find. As a matter of fact, I found nothing that said specifically that the person was delivered by a midwife. And in most states, they didn't require people to keep birth records or to even give birth information until maybe the 19-teens, about that time. So it's hard to find birth information.
I wonder how many people know what midwives are. This is the first time I've thought about it in a long time.
A lot of people may not know.
Well, anyway, what my understanding of it was is it was, and my grandmother said she did some of it, is you had different women that would help because there weren't doctors around. They'd come in and deliver the babies for the women. They'd be friends of the family or maybe family members.
And they had a lot of knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they'd get right in there just like the doctor and do what they had to do. The other thing that was interesting for me is my last name is Gatewood, and one night I was in the hotel. I used to work for Marriott Hotels here in Columbus, and I managed a little cocktail lounge there, and we were in there, and the airline pilots came in that night, and they were walking around. I was sitting I was making my rounds through the bar, and this guy came up and was sitting there, and I saw the name Gatewood. Well, he was a white gentleman, and he and I said, Gatewood, and I turned around and I made sure he could see my name tag, and we looked at each other and said, oh my goodness. And we started talking. He was in the hotel for about a week. So what we were doing is he was leaving and calling his relatives that in the evening and getting information, and I was doing the same thing, and found out that my family was part of his family's plantation. I guess his grandfather had left the family in Kentucky and moved up to Indiana. Because we had relatives there and in Kentucky, so it was kind of interesting, the things you stumble upon as you go through life. And then the other thing was last night I was looking at HGTV and I saw somebody had a family tree on the wall, and they took actual tree branches. This guy decorated this house. I mean, he was.
I saw that too.
Did you see that?
It was beautiful.
He had these tree branches, and then he took parts of a tree branch, you know, a thick part, maybe something about 8 inches wide, you know, and they sliced it in, and they had pictures set in there. It was just
wonderful. It's beautiful.
It's something I'm going to have to play with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, definitely enjoyed this. When it's my turn again, I've got something I want to share because I think this is pretty timely. You know, you never think about things until you get right up on them. And today, it made me think about some things that I want to share as my closing remarks whenever Julia allows me to do that.
Okay. Well, it's time for Did You Know? Interesting. I know Thanksgiving is already past, but this was interesting information, so I just had to bring it anyway. In 1578, and this is about Canada, in 1578, English explorer Martin Frobisher, who had unsuccessfully been trying to find a northern passage to the Orient, settled in Newfoundland and held a formal ceremony to give thanks for surviving his long wandering journey. This is considered the first Canadian Thanksgiving. And in 1879, the Canadian Parliament declared Thanksgiving a national holiday on the second Monday in October. In 1857, New England started turkey as a tradition on Thanksgiving.
Gobble, gobble.
Yes, and in the 1930s, football games, oh my goodness, were being played on Thanksgiving Day. And here's one for you. 1927, guess what was invented? A popular drink. Kool-Aid. Now, back to T.Wayne.
Tastes great. Wish you had some. Can't wait. Hey, come on. See how those jingles stick with you? Anyway, yeah, I thought this was very timely when I saw this as we were going through this genealogy. Because I have a pretty large family. I'm an only child, but I come from a family. My mother had a family of 11 brothers and sisters. And one of her brothers, he always says that family is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. He said, there's nothing more important than family. At the end of the day, in most cases, that's all you're going to have.
Right.
And a few years ago, I sat down and I wrote up something about traditions because which I think is so critical. A lot of people maybe don't pay attention to their traditions, but I think traditions are critical because those are the things you look forward to every year, right? Or, you know, as different occasions come along. So anyway, I just wanted to challenge people to think about your traditions, make sure you pass them on, make sure you realize how important they are.
Well, everyone out there in the radio land, it's close to that time. Please remember, strive to improve yourself wherever you are in life. You have been listening to the Community Table Talk. WCRX-LP Columbus, Ohio, 102.1 FM, the broadcast radio service of the Bexley Public Radio Foundation. And our website, WCRXLP.com. So long, everybody, and have a great week.